All right, we are live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome on this wonderful Thursday, June 26th, 3 p.m., where I'm reporting to you live from Richmond, Virginia. But, happy early afternoon. And to those of us on the West Coast. And we're just so thrilled for everyone to be here at our LinkedIn Live event, Small But Mighty, Microforests as Climate Adaptation Superheroes. We've brought together two of the most recent microforest builders from the Groundwork Network to chat with us today and share a bit about their process, their impact, and really whatever else they would like to tell us about microforests as an innovative approach to urban forestry. My name is Dr. Jeremy Hoffman, and I am the Director of Impact Evaluation and Community Science at Groundwork USA. Groundwork USA is the support nonprofit to a 21-city network of place-based and people-centered nonprofits working on the front lines of climate change and, more importantly, community resilience. While environmental improvements are at the heart of our work, and climate adaptation is nearly a universal priority, we also take a holistic approach to community resiliency by integrating urban greening, community-rooted leadership development, and inclusive economic development efforts simultaneously. But that's enough about me and Groundwork USA for now. Let's meet our esteemed guests and learn more about what they're up to. Like I said, I'm joined by two of my colleagues today, Curly Tillumsis and Harrison Nesbitt, both who have recently planted their first microforests, but they have both been stalwarts in the urban forestry and climate resilience space for years. Curry, can you say hello, tell us a little bit about your role and how you got into urban forestry as a climate resilience solution?
Sure, yeah, thanks for having me today. So I'm the Urban Tree Program Manager with the Trust Groundwork Rhode Island. And I've been here for a couple of years now, really got into the work and tree planting as I love a natural solution to combating climate change. So trees are kind of a natural, route for that. And I have a public health and program management background. And so this position became available, and it's been a great fit for me. And the work that we're doing is really great and exciting. And I love work that can also really directly include our communities.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us, Curry. We'll come back to you just in a little bit. But Harrison, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your role, where you're coming from, and how you got into urban forestry as a climate resilience solution?
Yeah, certainly. And Jeremy, thanks so much for having us. It's always fun to talk about microforests. And thanks for everyone who's joining. But my name is Harrison Nesbitt. I'm the Community Adaptation Manager here at Groundwork Hudson Valley. We're based in Yonkers, New York, but we do a lot of work throughout southern Westchester. So we do work in Yonkers, and then we do a lot of work within the Sawmill River watershed. So I came to this position, I've been here for about 1.5 years now. Prior to this, I worked in film. So a bit of a transition, but I was really interested in sort of how do we adapt to the climate crisis? How do we bring parks into cities? How do we promote nature-based solutions for warmer and wetter weather? And I think there's few better ways to do that than trees, given all the co-benefits they bring. From, just like the intangibles, like it feels good to sit under one, it's nice to hear bird songs, to the really tangible, like sort of quantifiable things. They capture stormwater, they cool our streets. So really just jazzed to talk trees.
Well, I am, consider me your jazz band leader today, and we're going to be zipping around from topic to topic here. And so I wanted to start by kind of setting the stage. Why are we talking about microforests? And then we'll lead into a discussion with our panelists, and we'll get you out of here before the end of the hour, sending you off with some hopeful ideas, as well as ways that you can stay informed about everything going on in the Groundwork Network. So thanks to both of you for introducing yourselves. Again, I'm Jeremy Hoffman, and like Harrison and Curry said, we all love trees here in the Groundwork Network. In fact, I just was riding my bike back through Richmond, Virginia this afternoon following a meeting downtown, and I was purposefully moving from street to street that I just know has the best tree coverage. It's still 95 degrees in Richmond today. So shade is by far my favorite of all of the things that trees do, but we're going to investigate a whole bunch of other great things that they can do when they're densely packed together in a microforest. But let's start where we always do, with what's going on. 2024 was the hottest year on record, and already 2025 is shaping up to be one of the hottest. And, no, we're not talking about the latest Lorde album, which is due out this summer. We're talking about climate change. Due to the buildup of heat trapping gases in the atmosphere from human activities like burning coal, oil, and gas, the Earth's thermostat is getting turned up. This puts extra strain on our cities where most people live, and where the urban heat island effect can ramp up temperatures even higher than that particular heat event due to the lack of green spaces, fewer trees, and an overabundance of paved over surfaces, as well as a history of race and income-based disinvestment that has left some of our neighborhoods directly on the front lines of climate change. We're also dealing with compound issues, like Harrison mentioned, like flooding and extreme precipitation, and poor air quality days from wildfire smoke coming from wildfires that are burning thousands of miles away. The stakes get higher every year, and our commitment to resident-led action on these stressors deepens every single day. Our cities need solutions fast, as the heat wave where 99 million people in our country were exposed to extreme heat over the last several days didn't make it more clear. And we are here today to talk about one of those most exciting opportunities to expand high impact green space in limited, space: microforests. Known more colloquially as Miyawaki forests, based on the pioneer work of Dr. Akira Miyawaki in Japan, these are small but mighty planting projects that concentrate hundreds of locally native plants and trees into the space of kind of just a few parking spots. I try and remove car normative talking, so we could also say several bike racks. Because of this high concentration of organisms in the same space, sharing the same nutrients and competing, they increase their growth rate significantly. So much so that these microforests can establish into mature forests in the span of just a few years instead of many decades. From past microforest projects pioneered in the Groundwork Network by Groundwork Elizabeth in New Jersey, we've seen just how they can soak up water like a sponge, hundreds of thousands of gallons of stormwater over the course of a 30 to 50 year period. They directly reduce the urban heat island effect by tens of degrees. We've seen that trees in Elizabeth's microforest are already as thermally efficient as many mature trees nearby. And they stimulate soils to become carbon vacuums. We see some microbial activity really kicking off in these soils in New Jersey. These then also give residents really high quality green spaces and provide some much needed forest bathing time. Also, ultimately, it comes down to dollars and cents sometimes. These microforests are extremely cost effective, giving back over $10 to their community for every single dollar we spend on them. A $10 return for a $1 investment is huge. So how do we do it? Well, that's why we're here today. We're going to learn from the Groundwork Network all about how we do microforests. So we are going to now transition into a little bit of discussion to answer that very question. Harrison, we're going to start with you. Urban heat is a major challenge in dense cities with very little green space like Yonkers. Are there other issues that Yonkers experiences, and what drew the community to a microforest as a solution to some of these issues?
Yeah, great question and really great overview. Wow, my office, hold on one, is so loud. They got to make cubicles that are soundproofed. So flooding is the really big one. We were really pleased. The New York, New Jersey Harbor Estuary Program and the EPA funded our microforest with the goal, and sort of our deliverable for that was to develop some kind of green infrastructure that would divert water that would otherwise put pressure on our fragile combined sewer system. And by doing that, we're helping to limit the amount of pollutants that enter either the Sawmill River, or either, if it does enter the Sawmill River, then it goes into the Hudson River. So Jeremy brought up the term sponge. I think sponge is a really fun term that folks are using now. Folks, we want the sponge city, we want the sponge blocks. So our microforest is a wee thing, but it could actually have big old impacts as a sponge. We built ours in the front yard of a local public school in Yonkers, and it slopes down with the yard. So we've done some storm modeling. We know where, when it rains, where that rain goes, and we positioned our microforest so that it would capture a lot of that water that would otherwise flow down that hill and enter a catch basin. And on a rainy day, that would then go out into the Hudson River. So that's another one. And then a really critical thing is a lot of students in Yonkers don't really have access to nature, even though it's closer than they think, but they don't think that the parks that are nearby are really for them. So it's really important that we are doing this where students already are. This is near a basketball court. This is near a volleyball court. This will be a place for folks to rest after they get hot, but it's also a place for community members to just have a rest if they're kind of cutting through the school after work. And it being in a place where the community already feels comfortable allows them to know that it's for them. So it really hits to what Jeremy was saying about that feeling of forest bathing, allowing people to get a sense of why nature is important and what it can do for you.
And I think you brought up a really interesting detail there, Harrison. Thank you for explaining a little bit about your project in this stormwater infrastructure issue. You know, we also in Richmond, Virginia, where I live, are a combined sewer system area in my neighborhood. And for those who are maybe unfamiliar with that kind of infrastructural decision that was made well before the present day, what that does is basically the sewer system is always working to combine runoff that's happening from rain falling on roads and surfaces around our cities. That goes into the sewer, where it combines with the outflow of basically, you know, refuse coming from our homes and businesses. So why is that an issue? Well, back when it was designed, that was able to accommodate both severe inflows coming from the sewer as well as the input from homes and businesses. But under present day precipitation rates, which are more falling in a shorter amount of time, that overwhelms those systems and causes overflow events, which means the combined sewer, you know, kind of gross stuff that comes out of our houses mixed with the rainwater, which is picking up pollutants from the road surfaces, gets dumped through outflow kind of areas directly into waterways. And so here in Richmond, we have, following a severe precipitation event, hours, if not days of time where it's unsafe to recreate in those water bodies and has severe implications for the organisms that call the river home. So these downstream, quite literally, impacts of extreme precipitation are a huge question for a lot of cities that are older, like the ones in the Groundwork Network. So I just wanted to make sure to cover that and how special it is that you were able to include some stormwater modeling to understand how to maximize the impact on stormwater mitigation, as well as all the other great things that we know about that microforests do. So thank you, Harrison. Curry, same question to you. Providence faces really serious environmental and public health challenges, like many cities around the country. But Providence is kind of special in that it has some of the highest asthma rates in the country. Can you tell us a little bit about the environmental issues in your community, and why did you all arrive at a microforest as a way to add to the solutions to these challenges?
Sure. Yeah. That's a stat that unfortunately we are definitely not proud of. About 12% of our population has asthma, and our poor air quality is a big contributor to that, along with our aging housing, and that's all, of course, top of mind with the public generally. We have a lot of other common urban, problems as well, but something that we were really kind of wanting to focus on with the air quality is we're seeing, all the street trees that we were continuously planting, and seeing the benefits of those, but they're all kind of this like isolated, spread apart, space, and it's great for the residents to be seeing and getting the benefits from. But having that kind of approachable, like what Harrison mentioned, approachable like forest space in walking distance is really like very, even with the tiny Rhode Island that we are, even tiny Providence, pretty inaccessible to some folks. So having that kind of condensed forest space with all the benefits, the biodiversity, nature space, the mental health benefits. We have a lot of, opioid abuse issues that we're trying to continuously work on, and having this kind of holistic approach with the nature and mental health component that the microforest can have was also kind of a driving factor for us. We actually have two microforests, a mini microforest. It's actually even smaller than the just under 1,000 square foot, and then 1,000 square foot that we recently planted in May. And those are both partially, the one in May was from Groundwork USA, but also partially funded with our first one with Rhode Island Attorney General funds, which is actually penalty funds that we received from a scrap metal company that was heavily polluting the area. So we also felt like this, kind of niche, new, exciting project could really, be a good discussion point, different from your standard street tree conversation. Really getting volunteers involved was a big driving factor for us to focus on this shift, because, street trees are great, sure, but you can't ask a volunteer to plant like a large 2.5-inch caliper tree. But when it comes to a microforest, they're, small potted plants, and this is something that is very approachable for really getting the neighborhood involved. And so we just felt like it was really a win across the board for trying something new, trying something different, and getting that high air quality combator instant sort of forest feel right at the door for our community members.
That's incredible. And yeah, the air quality benefits are one of the main ways that these microforests contribute to the long-term public health of the neighborhoods in which we establish them. And, I just wanted to say, thank you. Several studies have been able to show that mental health indicators of stress are lowered when small-scale greening projects like this are established in their neighborhoods. A couple studies in Philadelphia were able to show pretty conclusively that not only mental health improved, but actual on-the-ground rates of things like violent crime, as well as feelings of hope in the neighborhood. So these things are really, really potent contributors to community resilience, community cohesion. And so speaking to that, this question of how the community is involved and some of the high points of that process, I wanted to now switch into kind of highlighting our community engagement wins, as well as some of the challenges. So Harrison, in Yonkers, your microforest is at a school. There's some really great photos of the community, residents, project partners, as well as city leaders kind of coming together to celebrate and help plant this first microforest in Yonkers. Can you say a little bit about what this experience has meant for you and for your community so far, and then we'll follow up with some questions about unexpected challenges. But you want to talk about the successes, how you built that community engagement, how you got people rallied around this idea, and what it's meant to you and the community so far?
Right. Yes. So I will start far away and then kind of come in close. But we have a really neat model here at Groundwork Hudson Valley for community engagement. We run a number of resident working groups, and each one has a goal of advancing specific actions or strategies within the Yonkers Climate Action Plan. So last year we piloted a tree working group. They go out and they inventory street trees so that we can get a better sense of the health of the urban forest in Yonkers. They also help to, I'm also just going to say, Jeremy, do like that if I'm getting too much background noise, or maybe this. They also help us to locate places to plant trees and help us to maintain trees. And we have an air quality working group that devises policies and strategies for improving the air quality in Yonkers. And we have lastly, shade structure working group, and they go out and they locate areas and work with a landscape architect to identify designs for shade structures in Yonkers, which is cool. Now, all three of those things could be part of the microforest, but we really relied on our tree working group to say, is this a project that we're interested in doing? Hold on one second. This is a project that we're interested in doing, and our working group was like pretty thrilled by it. So we approached a local school who was pretty game for doing some of this work, and they were really jazzed. The community was brought in at a really early stage where our working groups were aware of this project. They were really excited about doing it. And then we planned it for about 5 months. So starting in 4 months, so starting in early January, we went to a couple of science classes, and we worked with the students, introducing them to what a microforest was, where they would like to see it, how they would want it designed, and they were brought in throughout the process. And then closer to the event, we started bringing in more community members, letting them know what was happening. So on the day of, we had like close to 70 people there. Everyone was super, super jazzed. And I'd say aside from our terrific green team, very few people had ever planted a tree before. And we kind of knew that going in. So rather than kind of make folks feel like they, didn't feel comfortable asking questions or whatever, we had wonderful folks from Groundwork USA, including Meg Morgan, the Forester for Groundwork USA, and we walked folks through the process. So before they could plant a tree, they would come to a table and they would be given like their license. So they had to learn they looked at a few photos of how to plant a tree. And after they had done that, they were given a trowel or a shovel. And that way they could go in with a little bit of confidence. And then we asked that everyone plant a tree with a partner. And that way there was some accountability, but also it kind of speaks to the community engagement again. You're meeting someone else from your community. You're getting dirty with someone you may know, you may not know, but you certainly haven't planted a tree together. And what came about was it felt really, really celebratory. And we also had a lot of folks from the local government come as well. So it didn't feel, and we planted like 377 plants in 4 hours. So it was many hands make light work, but it felt like a party.
That's incredible. And, we continually hear about the kind of joining ability of these community-based planting events. And really the pictures from your event stand out, as well as from Curry's recent planting, as well as just the joy that it seems like people feel when, you actually get to place something in the ground. And what's really amazing about these microforests and how quickly they grow, you can observe it from almost seemingly month to month. They have such dramatic change. And the benefit of it being located at a school is huge in the sense of creating a space, a real learning laboratory for these youth to learn about ecology and climate change and urban forestry, all in a real place that is doing real things for their community directly. And I'm so excited. Both of these sites will be getting mapped for their thermal qualities as a kind of first year estimate later this summer. So we're really, really looking forward to understanding the immediate effects as well as those long-term ones. So now, Harrison, I guess as a follow-up to that, were there any unexpected challenges, either, logistically, technically, or otherwise, that you had to navigate that you'd want others to know about as they enter into potentially planting their own microforest?
Yes, I do have one more little image or tidbit that I'll bring up, which is I was there a few weeks ago at the microforest pulling weeds do come. I was pulling some mugwort, some moringa, and this older gentleman. So the school like cuts through two avenues, so a lot of folks in the community kind of walk past it. And he stopped and he took a picture of a pine tree that's like this big, and I said, "Hey, how you doing?" He was like, "This was the first tree I ever planted. I'm just trying to see how it's doing," and leaned down and took a little picture. And I'm a softie, but I teared up. So, if you're prone to crying, be warned, microforest could bring in tears. But make sure you spill into the microforest capture. A great barrier that we had was I was just really excited to do it. And there's a checklist that I think that one should follow when they do a microforest. One is make sure that your water is pretty close. We're dealing with some pressure issues right now where the source is a little further than I thought it would be, which is impacting our micro sprinkler system. So that's one thing that I would look out for. And the other is doing a soil survey prior to identifying the place. We're lucky that the soil turned out to be all right. It was just very compacted, so we could loosen it up. There wasn't anything bad in there. And then the third thing is make sure that facilities is on board from the beginning. That's one mistake that we made, where we were in touch with the administration and the teacher, but we did not speak one-on-one with the facilities team. And those folks are great, but like anyone else, they want to be included early on. And that was a learning lesson. So I think making sure that you bring facilities in, that they feel like they're a part of that and they can raise concerns, and make sure you know where your water is coming from. And then the last thing is you get a bunch of stuff delivered for a microforest. So just make sure that there's an easy place for a big truck to dump many cubic yards of compost and mulch, or else you'll spend 12 hours bucket by bucket walking mulch to a terrific little site. So that's my little checklist.
Wow, that's really, really great, like logistical insights as well as planning insights. As many of you know that are listening in, trees require at least a couple years of really consistent watering, especially through the heat season, in order to maintain their viability long term. And while what's really great about a microforest is that they require very minimal amounts of maintenance after the first couple of years, nonetheless, they are still plants that require, water to survive. So that's really, really helpful, Harrison. Thank you for sharing that kind of both logistical and technical, and I guess what would you call that, like labor kinds of things? Like you don't want to be carrying buckets and buckets of compost around if you don't need to. So thank you very much for that, Harrison. Curry, turning to you, what strategies have you found, the most effective in engaging the Providence community around not only your first microforest, but this Pearl Street microforest? Can you tell us some of the successes and some of the high points for you and your community that you've seen so far?
Sure, yeah. So with our very first like microforest, that was really kind of driven by an existing relationship we had with our parks department. So it's in a school bus path, kind of like mini walking strip mini park. So having that space already available and kind of already in communication with the partners there made it kind of easy, because we already had a relationship with the neighbors. We already had a relationship with a lot of the direct community there. And then of course having the city and parks relationship kind of helped build out, that space and involvement. And then their kind of network for the volunteers there really helped. And it was a wonderful launching experience for us with that mini microforest, for then as like kind of a pilot to then also get all of these volunteers that attended that. It was actually right after the election. November 6th was our first planting. And so it was a really, really great outlet for people in our entire network, not just the community, but kind of an uplifting space for people this is something we can build on and have some hope for, and it was needed. And so and it was great to have that. huge turnout to then say, okay, we have this other microforest we're installing in the spring. Like, we have your information, like we're going to keep you informed. And so we kind of did a similar, like leaned on reaching out to them, expanding on their network, internal friends, neighbors that they had, the great experiences they had with that planting. And then, speaking to the immediate community members, where the next microforest that we did in May, that in Pearl Street, which is also in a garden. So that also helped that we had the network of the collaborating organization that is, tending to the maintenance there, Pearl Street Garden Cooperative. And so they were able to use their networks. They have a neighboring Space Avenue concept. So we talked to them. So we just kind of kept building out from who everyone knew. And we, similar to Harrison, had, I think, over 70 volunteers, which, was amazing. Or maybe even more than that. We have to still get the final head count. But it was a pretty rainy day, a pretty gross day. And it was just wonderful to see this turnout amidst nasty weather. Like, people are still so motivated to do this. Some experience based on the previous microforest install, but some really new, never planted before. We did a similar kind of tutorial learning. Had kind of quadrants. We had a more circular spaced plot, so we kind of did like quadrants and had kind of assignees to help guide where to plant. And but it was just, I think, building on the networks that you have, beyond just like the direct outreach of neighbors going to be in that space and area, but also just building on other existing networks, and Groundwork works with so many. So that was helpful to kind of get the turnout that we were hoping for. That answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. I mean, I think that's exactly the kind of success, leaning on our existing partnerships is a great way to make sure that you're reaching, a holistic amount of the residents nearby who might be interested in the urban farm, but may not have considered urban forestry as a really important thing to contribute to their farm space. So I guess on the flip side of that, you've documented some really key successes around building on, the momentum of your first microforest, making it easier to recruit folks for the second one. Do you have any other, I guess like challenges or surprises that came up that you'd want others to know about in advance of starting their own microforest campaign?
Sure. So I think that, keeping organized with contacts and stuff, just to keep building on if you're planning to do more of them, or even just having that for future planning generally, that's always an important just tidbit, I guess, which it's been really helpful for us to stay organized with that. And then one, I guess, like planting strategy on day of is, again, like most of the volunteers aren't necessarily going to know anything about planting, and also just not going to necessarily know. I mean, everything's very dense in a microforest, but you still want to have the spacing kind of around, because you're trying to be thinking about, sun space and, and the true like layers that you're trying to achieve within using the Miyawaki method. So trying to just really have, I think, even more point people. Maybe Harrison, I don't know if you had this, but if you had a one-on-one situation, you didn't have this much of a problem. But we would have, and with our quadrant system and our leads, they couldn't always be seeing who was planting, and so some things would get kind of shifted, and most of it was fine. Some things we had to just kind of, after the volunteer event, kind of redo a little bit, some just shifting of things just that made more sense. But it just can get like a little chaotic as you scale up. And so I think just having that day of organization is really important, and really just taking the lead time to really like have a run of show, really organized with all of your point people, your check-in table, if you have to have a liability form, media release form, like having all those stationed and really acting it out ahead of the actual event, because it's a great, wonderful, excited energy, but it does need to be organized energy just for that. And I think that one other take-home point that we really had to be thinking of and wanting to be really mindful of is these are, especially for the smaller school bus path one, it's a pretty public space, and it's a fun, cool looking thing, but it does look kind of wild at the beginning. After, the first years, while the new weeds are coming in, and some of them are good, you get out the invasives, but it's wild looking. And so keeping that signage really clear, that, however you want to, just for those passing by that didn't necessarily know about what this is, just having like kind of a real clear signage. And we put a little bit of like a fencing guard just to kind of show a visual marking of, this is a space, if it is in like a public setting, like a park or something like that. In our community garden, it's a little different because it's very obviously in like a contained space, that this feels more I don't know, logical. But yeah, I think that's an important thing to consider. And then I guess a last cost effectiveness note is like, the soil we didn't have to replace for either of ours either. With Harrison, we did the testing beforehand. That's a huge step. But if you were to have to really overhaul and do all the excavating, I think that is something like we would like to down the road look toward, but it is an added expense that we haven't had to incur yet. And so both of ours were very affordable feeling, very, approachable in that sense. But I think that down the line, that extra cost could just be something that people should be mindful of depending on their scouting locations.
Yeah, that's super helpful. I mean, some of these, we're talking about doing a forest in a urban setting. So who knows what's under our feet sometimes in a city. So that, I think you both made a very good point about making sure that the soil is up to the task of hosting a forest. I think, Elizabeth, New Jersey did even some soil amendments in order to increase the viability of the forest and its overall health. So very good points all across logistics, day of, planning, talking to the residents, getting the momentum going, and then making sure if we're doing new ones somewhere else to really do that planning and thinking deep about what it is that we need to do in order to get it over the finish line. So thank you both for sharing that really key insights about your projects. And so with those insights in mind, I want to ask you both, what's coming up next for your microforest? Or do you have other ones planned? Tell us a little bit about what to expect in the near future in Yonkers, Harrison, and then we'll go to you, Curry.
I'm also going to add on to what Curry said, that I think it's really important to make sure that the event is pretty well planned. So like one of the things we did, and Curry, I'm wondering if you did it similarly, is we put all the plants where we wanted them to go. So like we kind of set it out randomly because it's supposed to be random, and then sort of thought like a little bit more of like sun angles. What do we not want blocking? Let's make sure the canopies are spaced out. So that way folks could just enter the forest, pick up a plant, and they knew where to plant it. But I agree that there is a certain amount of chaos where we did a quadrant system thinking that we wanted to force people to plant in one quadrant. But of course, then people want to spread out. So there's only so much you can control, but I totally agree with what Curry was saying. Not sure what's next yet. We know right now just monitoring this one and looking for funding to create another one. I really agree with Curry, and I was lucky before I planted this microforest. I got in touch with a lot of other folks. Not that there are many who have planted microforests in this area. And one of the key things that everyone has brought up is how do we really make this like financially feasible for a lot of folks, and how do you reduce capital when creating these? So our biggest expense was having an excavator, a mini excavator, just to lift up the soil. We didn't have to amend it, but we did because it was so compacted. Just mix in compost and some mulch into it. So that was a big expense, but I do think we're thinking actively about what are the ideal sites in Yonkers now that we have this kind of checklist, and then how do we also make sure that they're not too expensive. I think the issue with us as Yonkers is, fun fact, if everyone's sitting down, second hilliest city in the U.S. behind San Francisco, but not only that, it's very rocky. So we kind of need an excavator no matter what, just because there's so many rocks in the soil. So, and then we actually installed an air quality monitor next to our microforest. So we'll start to see if there are any noticeable changes there. And I think the next step is really seeing how this grows and monitoring how the trees are doing, so that when we plant the next one, we can kind of get a sense of what worked and what didn't. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is, I guess, too geeky, so shake your head if you don't need this, but we technically didn't really do a Miyawaki forest. So a Miyawaki forest is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Curry and Jeremy, but I think like 75 or 70% canopy trees, so oaks, maples, large trees, and we were closer to like 5 or 10% of those. The idea was that, so we mainly planted understory trees or trees that do well with shade. The thinking is we're hoping that that prevents die-off from a lot of our canopy trees. So as this forest matures, the trees that do die probably are shorter lived, or maybe some of the ground cover we put in is wrong. So that's also kind of an experiment, and that was intentional because we know that Groundwork Elizabeth has a really incredible Miyawaki forest, and we just were curious to know what a different blend would look like. So I think the next forest will sort of build on, maybe after a year of study of ours, what worked, what didn't. And if we find through Jeremy's science that we're also not as cool as we could be with a proper Miyawaki forest, then I think we'll do that.
That's incredible. Yeah, I'm so excited, that you have this really hyper focus on making sure you know all the ins and outs of what happened with your first one, while also looking to the future on this checklist that you mentioned. That's a really powerful tool. And I know Groundwork Hudson Valley has these really dependable community, advisory boards that you were mentioning earlier. So we're really looking forward to seeing what comes next for you. And Curry, can you talk a little bit about what might be coming up next for Groundwork Rhode Island?
Yeah, absolutely. I do just want to quickly note to Harrison too. I think I should say like Miyawaki inspired is what we kind of were saying too, because we kind of had to do some variation, and there's certainly like different sources of things we wanted to get and didn't necessarily get day of, and just different logistical things. But so just having that note. But we are also tracking ours just sort of like internally with our staff and volunteers that are helping kind of take care of steward it. Trying to get a lot of nature feedback photos, encouraging iNaturalist submissions and writing to us if they see anything cool, just to keep that photography traction up there. Any social media posts we're hoping to really get into as things are blooming. And as far as and I'm trying to get some of our local, we have Brown University right near Johnson and Wales University. We have a lot of universities and colleges nearby, and trying to get some students potentially to have this as like a long-term passing the baton project. We had spoken to one of the professors there that does a lot on air quality, so trying to maybe involve them possibly for existing ones. But we also have a hopeful idea of a next one down the line, also in Providence, in a different community space that we are still working on discussions with, but they seem quite excited about, depending on their own kind of funding and keeping the organization and property going. So more on that when I have it, but that's kind of our identified next option, which has already open space, and we would need to test the soil, but having it already as an open space that I think would really benefit community members is exciting. So we'll see.
That's incredibly exciting. And I really can't stress enough how excited I am to see both of your projects grow and change and be there to assist you in understanding the impact. And so actually, here we're going to start to wrap up. But before we do, there was a question from an audience member about educational materials. Were either of your trusts producing educational materials on microforests, the benefits of microforests, and making them available or distributing them to the community? And either one of you can chime in as you'd like.
We don't have anything that we've passed out specifically, more just like our blanket information that we shared about trees that we were talking to people with. But we have some kind of overview information on our signage that's coming out.
Yes, and we are adding a lot of this information to our website. It's not up yet, but that'll be up shortly. We just finished our Microforest sign. So I think folks can reach out to me if you have questions. We do have a one-pager that we use at community events, and we'd be happy to share that with folks. Just shoot me an email, I guess.
Awesome. Yes. So that's a huge benefit to the community and a kind of lasting resource for others as other organizations not in the Groundwork Network or within the Groundwork Network decide to plant their own microforests. There was another question from an audience member talking about how do we document the money or the economic benefit for the dollars that we spend on it? And so I'm happy to answer that question really quickly. What's great about green infrastructure as a whole, there's a long literature of benefit transfer methods that allow us to value the environmental, social, and economic benefits of things like trees. So the U.S. Forest Service, as well as FEMA, make values available for the amount of air quality pollutants that trees reduce from the air. So NO2, CO2, particulate matter, and so on. Those have economic values that we can actually estimate over the lifespan of a tree. Also, you mentioned, Harrison, earlier, the amount of stormwater. Cities charge for stormwater, allowing us to make an economic valuation of the expected stormwater contribution of these different green infrastructure installations. Also, trees and microforests cool the area. And it actually turns out that the associated cooling from increasing a city's tree canopy is associated with offset health risks from things like heat-related illness. You know, here in Richmond and around the state of Virginia, there were almost 600 heat-related illnesses over the last several days. And so that costs a lot of money to treat to those people. So by cooling down cities, we see an attendant reduction in their health-related impacts. The most extreme of those being offsetting heat-related mortality in seniors. And so by valuing those different benefits and then weighing them against the cost of the installation and maintenance over time, we can come to a benefit cost ratio for our microforests and other green infrastructure. If you're interested, if that audience member is still curious about how we actually do that on, a spreadsheet level, I'm happy to get super nerdy with you about that whole process. And I want to shout out our partners at Earth Economics, who have really revolutionized our ability to do those sorts of calculations ourselves and across our network for a variety of different interventions. So here we are, 3:47. I don't think we expected this conversation to go so fast. But like our microforests growth rate, we are at the end of our conversation, and the acceleration is due to all of this wonderful close-up conversation about the benefits of these microforests. So from me to my panelists, thank you so much for being here and for contributing to our growing understanding of how microforests benefit our communities across the Groundwork Network. I'm Dr. Jeremy Hoffman. Please follow along our urban forestry efforts. You can find Groundwork USA on social media and LinkedIn. But the best way to stay updated on all of our microforest growth is to sign up for the Groundwork USA newsletter. You can get updates on our next discussions, other LinkedIn live events, webinars that we host, as well as published resources like the ones that you heard Curry and Harrison talking about to support your green space projects in your neighborhood. So join me in saying thank you to Harrison and Curry. Thank you everyone who has joined us today for joining us for our LinkedIn live event. Thank you both so much.